Assalamu alaikum everyone, this is Sanobar Sultan, and today I will be discussing a topic which is very interesting because you all have heard the name of Socrates. Yes, Socrates, who is considered as father of Western philosophy, but actually he never wrote anything down. He never wrote any of his philosophies. So you might have come across many quotations from Socrates over social media, and Socrates said this, Socrates said that, but actually Socrates never wrote anything down. And whatever that you read about Socrates is actually second-hand information that his students wrote about him or his peers wrote about him, especially Plato. Now, Plato was the teacher of Aristotle, and Socrates was who Plato considered his teacher. And so I'm going to discuss that why Socrates never wrote anything down. Now, I'll give a little brief introduction about Socrates before I delve into that important question. And that is that Socrates' life as well as his death, they are marked by keen interest even today. And the thing is, he was given a death sentence by drinking poison or hemlock because the jury at that time, they said that he was corrupting the mind of the youth. And with his revolutionary ideas, which were considered revolutionary at the time, he was accused of corrupting the minds of the youth. How was he corrupting the minds of the youth? Because he rejected democracy. He was against democracy. He rejected the gods that the people of Athens were worshipping at that time. And he made people appear as fools when they couldn't answer his questions. So people weren't happy about it. And his tragic ending is often, quoted with a famous saying, which is, quote, "The unexamined life is not worth living." So Socrates, by the way, when I mentioned that Plato considered him a teacher, Socrates himself did not consider himself a teacher. In fact, he looked down upon this entire concept of teaching. And he despised the idea that you gained an income out of teaching. So he thought that knowledge should be free and nobody should be paid for teaching, that you shouldn't get a salary or an income out of teaching. It should be something that should be done freely. And what did he used to do? What was his philosophy? Basically, he would go into a marketplace. Socrates would simply go to a marketplace and start questioning people, be they rich people, poor people, literate people, illiterate people. He would start asking them questions about their own self, about identity, about what is this, why is the way that it is. And then the answers that those people would give them, he would make out counter questions out of them. And that is what is referred to as dialogue or dialectics later in philosophy. So he used to only converse in questions. That is why sometimes when people couldn't answer those questions, it made them appear as fools and they criticized Socrates more. Now Socrates, when he was given the death sentence by drinking poison, he could have chosen a lesser penalty. He could have gone into self-exile, but he didn't. So Socrates is still remembered for the way that others perceive him to be, the way that Plato has represented him, or two of his other famous, what they consider themselves to be as students of Socrates. Socrates himself never considered himself to be a teacher. Now we get to the main point, which is, why did Socrates never write anything down? Now there are two strands to it, two aspects of why he wouldn't write. The first strand is because Socrates considered himself to know nothing. Because he considered himself that he knew nothing, that means he didn't have to write any philosophy. Because how can he write anything when he claims that he does not have any knowledge? Now that is one strand, but the other more sound reason, the philosophical reason, which I agree with and which Plato also mentions, is, which I will explain it now. Now, Plato, in his writing Phaedrus, he says that Socrates says, okay, Plato says that Socrates says about why he wouldn't write anything down is, quote, because writing is, quote, inhuman, pretending to establish outside the mind what in reality can be only in the mind, unquote. Now, what does this mean? Okay, let me explain it in very simplistic terms. What it means is that, for example, I have an original idea in my head, and now I want to translate that by putting it on paper. So my idea that is in my head will be transmitted through nerves, would be transmitted through language, and by the time it will get onto the paper, it will not be in the original form the way it is in my head, because it will be lost in translation. I can never replicate the exact thing which is in my head and express it to you, be it by language. So for Socrates, even when he's expressing something, it's actually not in the original form that he's thinking it. The originality is in the head. So if he puts anything down on paper, it will actually be not the way that he perceived it to be. So in reality, what he's trying to say, that the reality is actually in the mind. What he'll put down on paper will not be reality, will not be what he's trying to express himself. That is why he believed more in dialogue, in conversing, rather than putting something down. So that is the philosophical reason why Socrates never put anything down on paper. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that was a very intriguing question and an intriguing topic. And I hope that answered your question. This is a very, philosophy, it can be quite in-depth. So I will come up with more topics. If you like my videos, if you like what I have to say, then do subscribe to my channel, Sanoba's World, and watch my other videos as well. I shall see you all, dear audience, next week. Bye-bye.